Thank you for your answers. My question follows in the Senator Eggleton's. For possession of 30 grams for adults, and for young people it's 5 grams. The Standing Committee on Legal Affairs indicated that since the provinces, and you made reference to this as well, the provinces have all considered that simple possession would be prohibited for young people. So since you want to decriminalize and also respect the youth criminal justice system, why, rather than 5 grams, is it not 0?
I just looked to justice officials to see if they wanted to respond, but I'm quite prepared to respond to that. The discussion that took place with justice on the establishment of a 5-gram maximum was in reflecting a concern about young people being in possession of this drug in some circumstances that could be a higher risk. And so the concern was, if a young person is in possession and brings it to school, for example, or into a social setting with a lot of other young people, that there was a higher risk. And so there was concern about applying some reasonable limit on how much a young person could have within the Cannabis Act itself. And so the discussion of what was the appropriate place to set that, a discussion around 5 grams came up. But I think it was very important as well, and I'd reference I'd point out the reference to the Youth Criminal Justice Act, because in establishing the 5 grams, we also wanted to make sure that it was very clear to any law enforcement or prosecutor or judge that the principles of the Youth Criminal Justice Act must apply to any consideration of the prosecution of any the possession of in that amount for a young person. And finally, it was also based on a clear understanding. I met with all the provinces and territories. We spoke to them about the importance of using their appropriate jurisdictional authority to enforce the prohibition. And they all get it. It's their experience with alcohol too. It's their experience with tobacco. And so in every place in this country, it's an offense for a young person to possess alcohol. It's not a crime under the criminal law. It's an offense under the provincial jurisdiction and provincial regulation. Each province has its own regulation prohibiting possession of, purchase and consumption of alcohol, and its own offense ticket, provincial offense ticket regime, so that the police may enforce it. There was a concern that, unlike alcohol, we wanted to ensure that young people are not engaged in the distribution of cannabis, and so a reasonable limit was placed upon it. And I believe that's where the discussion around the 5 grams, and Carol, if you'd like to fill in that, please.
I think I would just add that the distinction between 30 grams for adults and 5 grams for young persons, 30 grams is quite a bit of dried cannabis. So the estimate would be 40 to 50 joints would constitute 30 grams. The reality is today, in a completely prohibited, criminalized regime, youth still have access to cannabis. So going forward, Bill C-45 recognizes that in a legalized and regulated environment, despite the fact that Bill C-45 prohibits selling, giving, distributing to youth in any circumstance by anyone, recognizes that the reality is a young person may still come into access with a small amount of cannabis. And that's why Bill C-45 proposes to not criminalize 5 grams below, but to leave it to provincial jurisdictions to address it, as the parliamentary secretary has just noted.
Okay, so we've